If you've been waiting to get good at drawing before you start watercolor, you might be missing out. What if I told you that it's not the obstacle you think it might be? I think drawing might have a role in watercolor painting, but it's not necessarily the first thing that you need to focus on. There are a few other things that I think are far more important. And these things can make or break your experience with watercolor, regardless of your skill level. So let's talk about all of this and decide what level of drawing skill you need to become a confident and happy watercolor painter. The truth is, our ideas about our drawing skills are only one of many obstacles that might have us hesitating when we're ready to start a new watercolor painting. If you find yourself thinking, if I can't draw it, how on earth am I going to paint it? Then it's no surprise that the blank page feels so scary. That gorgeous watercolor paper staring back at you with all its possibility and all its pressure. Now, this is very common, not just with beginners and not just at the start of the process. It can also be disappointing when your painting doesn't turn out quite how you've envisioned. Maybe the lines aren't that clean, or the proportions are off, or something about the composition doesn't feel quite right. These struggles can lead to a lot of self-doubt and leave you wondering whether you're cut out for watercolor painting after all. But please don't be discouraged. This happens to all of us. Many artists, even those with years of experience, face exactly the same challenges. The good news is that there are so many ways to move past these hurdles, and you don't have to be a master sketcher to get started. I will tell you my best advice for getting over that fear of not being good enough in a moment. But first, is it actually possible to paint in watercolor without ever learning to draw? In reality, you could choose to paint watercolor abstracts and never worry yourself about trying to achieve a likeness of any particular subject. That's just a personal choice. And I think watercolor is rather wonderful for that sort of thing. Although I must say abstracts are not what call to me right now. Watercolor is a medium that thrives on expression and spontaneity. So it really invites you to let loose with all those expressive loose techniques. You can play with color to evoke a mood, or use bold, sweeping brush strokes to suggest movement and energy. Watercolor's fluid nature allows you to experiment with blending, layering, and mixing colors in ways that will surprise and delight you. Personally, I love to use the expressive, spontaneous techniques for painting just about any painting subject. For me, watercolor painting is not about replicating exactly what I see. It's more about expressing the feeling and the emotion of what it is that I'm choosing to paint. So I like to start with a light sketch. It's far from perfect, it's just a guide. Then I collaborate with the water to add the color and emotion. And between you and me, I actually don't care all that much how my paintings turn out because it's just so much fun to do. I don't really see drawing and painting as separate skills. They're really part of the same creative process. For me, I think the distinction is just simply when you decide to switch from pencil to brush. Actually, I made a whole separate video all about this if you'd like to know more about that. I'll pop the links somewhere around here. There is a joy to imperfection, in my opinion, especially in our modern age with all this technology around us. To see evidence of the human hand is somehow heartwarming and a little bit charming. If you've been waiting to hear what the best way to overcome that fear of not being good enough is, this is it. Embrace the imperfection and give yourself permission to be a beginner and enjoy it. It's very easy to get caught up in the idea that your work needs to be flawless and try to focus on building all the skills you need before you can start painting properly. It just reinforces the idea that you need to be perfect. There's no joy in that. And for me, art is joy. There will always be flaws or mistakes. Actually, I really dislike the idea of calling anything a mistake. I made a video all about that too. Remember Bob Ross and his famous happy little accidents? Sometimes these moments of imperfection become the most unique and beautiful parts of your painting. Not always, of course, but I think the idea of embracing the happy little accidents is about making the most of whatever happens and learning from it. Just like life, really, don't you think? When it comes to watercolor, less is often more. You really don't need to draw every detail of your subject. Sometimes the suggestion of a shape or form is enough to convey the essence of whatever you're trying to depict. This is where embracing imperfection can actually work in your favor. Allowing your drawing to be loose and expressive gives a sense of movement and life that a more rigid and detailed approach might miss. Instead of focusing on getting everything right, just enjoy the process of creating, and that tends to shine through. So if the question is, Do you need to be skilled at drawing to be successful in watercolor painting? I guess the short answer is no, but having an idea of how to do some drawing can certainly help. Also, drawing is so much fun in its own right. The good news is that drawing is a skill that can be learned and improved over time. It's not about natural talent. It's about patience, practice, and finding techniques that work for you. For those who feel intimidated by drawing, there are many ways to simplify the process. For example, using reference photos and tracing can really help to build your confidence. That way, you get a feel for the proportions and shapes without the pressure of having to start from scratch. And over time, as you get more comfortable, you find yourself relying less and less on these sorts of aids. Of course, there are always those who are going to tell you that tracing is cheating. I have more to say about that, so I made a whole separate video. But in essence, I think it's just a scaffolding choice that supports you on your journey. And if you want to go beyond tracing, there are many ways to use this scaffolding idea in order to build your drawing skills. Over the years, I've come across so many really useful tips and techniques that make drawing a much simpler process. I put them all in my favorite course, which is called Drawing for Painters. Drawing is not just fun, it's actually good for you. To draw, the most important thing you need to be able to do is to observe. Really look at a subject, notice all the little details, both the obvious and the subtle. Psychologists and monks call this sort of thing mindfulness, I believe. And I can't think of a lovelier way to practice mindfulness than drawing and painting. At the heart of all art, whether it's drawing or painting or something else, is the fun of creation. It's easy to get caught up in the end result, but the fun of the process can be incredibly rewarding. When you approach your art with a sense of mindfulness, staying present in the moment, you can find a deep sense of satisfaction. Never underestimate the value of being able to slip away from the everyday stresses of normal life that we all endure by surrendering to a completely enjoyable task for a while. Remember, every artist is unique, and there's no right or wrong way to approach your art. The techniques that resonate with you might be different from those that work for someone else. The important thing is to figure out what brings you joy and build on that. Over time, you'll develop your own style and approach, and your confidence will grow. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from experience. The more you create, the more you learn about your own strengths, preferences, and styles. The essential thing is to find the joy in your practice. There's really no point otherwise. Once you've done that, you'll probably want to have a think about the role that you would like drawing to play for you in your watercolor painting process. As I mentioned a bit earlier, this is really just about figuring out when you want to switch from pencil to brush. But actually, there's quite a few options that you have to choose from. I did make a separate video all about that. I'll pop that one up on the screen right now so that you can watch that one next.